Hello, everybody. Welcome to an exciting new episode of Everything Horror Podcast with your host, Paul Dosky, with the lovely fiance,
Tessa Baker.
And we are here to give you another awesome, amazing interview of why you should not ever go into a witch's house. But on top of that, let's get right off with the director of the somewhat new film that just came out on DVD. It was actually premiered last year, October 2017 on Sci-Fi. And this is the director, Alex Merkin.
Hello. Nice to speak with you guys. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, thank you, Alex.
It's our pleasure.
Yeah, definitely always a pleasure. And so, Alex, just for people at home and wherever people may be listening to this, even if it's on YouTube or Spotify or whatever, for people that don't know you, could you introduce yourself and give us a little details about who you are?
Sure. My name's Alex Merkin. I've been making movies, I'd say professionally, for the last 10, 15 years. I've done 8 features. I've done multitude of commercials and music videos and television. I've often had a lot of dark or psychological thriller or and now a lot more horror projects that I've been involved with. So it's been a good run. I've been lucky to be steadily working since I got into the industry sometime around 05, 06. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Nice. So, Alex, for your first question, to start off with a bang here, well, maybe a bang, but what inspired you to want to direct film to begin with?
Oh wow! Well, I've always been a huge fan of the motion picture. My father used to take me to movies every weekend when I was younger, and I was just enthralled by them. So we would go to anywhere from 1 to 2 or 3 movies a weekend, and I sort of became obsessed with the process. And as I got into around middle school and high school, I started to really start to pay attention to the process of it. And anytime I could get my hands on a camera, I would be making little movies. And then as I got into high school, they actually had a filmmaking program in my school where I could actually film things and edit it. And I just, from there, I was locked in. I was I was the guy in school on the weekends editing my movies, as opposed to hanging out at the parties or doing other kind of mischievous things. So that's a little bit about how I got into it. I think from the moment it was always magical to me, just seeing the storytelling process and the way that movies really move people and frighten people and excite people and make them laugh and cry and all those things. And I just wanted to be a part of that process, and it became just fascinating to me how just watching the ways in which different aspects of film created different responses in people. And I think that was just such just an amazing thing for me to discover, that I've been doing it ever since.
Awesome. Yeah, when you just mentioned renting movies every weekend, man, I'm going to maybe sound like a dinosaur here for a minute for people, maybe, because I don't think there really is one around anymore. And if there is, I forget where it's located, but Blockbuster. I used to go there every weekend. Every time I got paid, I would get about 4 movies, if not more. And of course, they would all be horror movies.
Yeah.
And
No,
my weekend.
You don't sound like a dinosaur to me. I used to work in a video store when I was just in high school. I was working there. So, I mean, I loved it. I would be able to rent as many movies as I wanted for free and just take them home. And yeah, I was obsessive for sure. So
Nothing wrong with that.
no, actually, you know, there was something really nice about being able to walk into a video store and look at the covers of there was something just so much more special about it than, you know, going on your Apple TV and downloading it, you know. It's actually having the boxes in your hand, and it's just funny because even though everything is so technologically better and you can see things sound and look so much better, there was just something so much more special about the video store and you know, the physical copies in your hand and turning the boxes over and reading the back and looking at the, you know, at the images they released and just finding new movies that way as opposed to, like, you know, scrolling through Netflix or Amazon or something and clicking, you know.
Yeah. It's digital format to me is not the same as what you're saying with physical copies, because I mean, I don't know how many films that Blockbuster got me into, or because I found, like, perfect example is like the Nazi zombie comedy film called Dead Snow, or like the original Quarantine, which is known as Rec, REC, which is a Spanish film. But
right.
You know, when you actually look at it, though, with how the U.S. worked with retarded remakes and reboots nowadays, to me, I believe I saw Quarantine first, and you know, at the time, you're just like, oh, okay, this is cool, and I didn't realize it was a remake until Blockbuster, and I saw it Rec, and I'm like, oh, what's this? And then somewhere on the physical cover it said something about, like, this is the original before Quarantine. I'm like, wait, what? So of course I had to rent it, and after watching the original compared to, like, what the US did to it, you see so much of a big difference. And I don't, whether it be good or bad, which I always find Hollywood nowadays to be when it comes to remake. Yeah. And because like I'll say it again, the idea of the original compared to the US is so much different. Like, one quick idea before anybody wants to maybe take on this conversation too, but is when you watch the original movie, which is Rec, you notice throughout the whole movie it is not that dark, and you can actually see everything to, unless it's like one of those dark scenes in the movie. But when you go and watch, like, Quarantine, you notice the whole entire movie now is very dark. You can't see shit, and it's literally shot by shot by shot. It's just like,
right,
the hell. So I don't know. I mean,
well, no, you're right. I mean, the thing is with any movie, it's like the original may not always have the same amount of resources or things, you know, money behind it, but it was where the inspiration was when the film was created, and it was a much more pure form of the process itself. Like, so somebody saw that and said, oh wow, this is really great, let's now take this and make it again and try to make money out of it. But they weren't the ones that were those people behind that. So even if it's the same person making the movie, they're having to make that movie again. So when they hire a director to direct the same material that they've already directed a second time to be for American audiences, or when they hire a new director to come in and make this thing, it's not coming from the same place. It's not the same origin. So even in the sense of it being the same director, they've already done it. They're not as excited about the material as they were the first time when they made it. You know, they're doing it again because they're getting a paycheck or a bigger paycheck to do it, or, you know, or a bigger opportunity, bigger stage to put it on. But their own instincts are more dull. Like they can't. It's not like they're in the same headspace of inspiration and excitement about the project they were when they first made it. And that's the same goes twofold or threefold for a filmmaker they bring in who wasn't involved at all in the original. So I totally agree with you. It's never a good thing to see sort of the remake is always, the only times that a remake really is worthwhile is when the original project completely missed the point on the source material. So it wasn't necessarily the original filmmaker's idea. They got hired to make a movie based off of a book or based off of a story or some other thing, and they didn't do a great job with it, or they didn't have the money to do it right, or whatever it is. And then the person who comes in says, it had potential, but the best remakes are the ones of projects that fell short of what the original potential was. But when you see a remake of something that was great, it's always a very risky. It's always losing something in the next generation, I think.
The only thing that I've seen is the thing where you showed me like Martyrs, like the Americanized version, and then what was it, the French version?
The French version.
And then I've seen like Let Me In and
I've seen Let the Right One In.
Let the Right One In. Like those are the instances where I've seen movies like that, like original versus like a European version. Yeah.
Well, it's cool to see now, like a lot of the original movies be released and actually get a lot of attention, even though they're not American films. So like that movie that was released on Netflix not long ago that everybody was talking about, that was yeah, exactly, and Spanish language film, and they it was nice to see a foreign film like that get that kind of excitement, and not need a remake to get that kind of buzz. You know what I mean? So,
well, not yet.
So yeah, I know. Now they'll do it. Now because it's had the buzz, it'll get its remake. But it's cool to see that at least it's not something. What's nice is that more and more audiences have access. More mainstream audiences have access to these projects, whereas before they probably, they wouldn't learn about it until the remake came out, and then they go, oh, there's another one that came out before this, and then they go find that one. But now you're hearing about this stuff as soon as it comes out, which is nice, and people are finding it that way and blowing it up on the internet, so that's good.
Yeah, I guess I can agree with what you're saying. Yeah, I mean, that goes back to like what I said. If it wasn't for quarantine, I wouldn't have known there was an original. So, but
right, exactly.
Yeah, and then what's another one? Shudder. I have yet to see the original one, even though we have it, but I just haven't gotten the motivation to just watch the original one. So, but one of these days.
Yeah, one of these you'll get around to it for sure. So good.
Is there any film or films that you directed that you wish that you could go back and refilm?
Yeah, most of them. It's just how it is. You never have. The thing is that you never really have the time or it's like sometimes or the resources. Sometimes there are movies where it's like. There were some films I did earlier in my career where I made an attempt to make the film better than the source material of where the original producers were coming from. So they would bring a script to me, I'd read it, and I'd say this is not a good script. But if you let me rework it, I'll do it. Or because look, when you're working with certain people who are fairly big in the industry, it's not always easy to be like, yeah, I'm just going to say no and not make a movie now, because you have to. This is your career, and you're trying to. It'd be one thing if you could make anything you wanted and not have to worry about a budget, not have to worry about appeasing producers or a studio, and just be able to if the playing field was level. And I could have the same budget as some of the biggest guys out there, and not have to worry about this or that. Then sure, then I could say no to stuff. that I didn't like up front. But when you're younger and you're breaking into the industry, you gotta take work. You gotta start to build, your name and your reputation out there. And so anyway, there were films where I would try to make them. I would take the script, I'd work it out, I'd make it better on paper, and then you get into the editing room, and then you realize that the producers they're still in the mindset of the bad material that they wanted to make in the beginning, and then they come in and they start trying to they start trying to push you and rework things that are just so much better if they would let it be what it's meant to be, as opposed to trying to turn a steak into a hamburger. You know what I'm saying? It becomes this thing where they just try to and then so I've learned a lot about where to push and where not to push when it comes to material that you're making, and what places are okay to try to elevate the material and what places don't work. But I've obviously, I would say that I've a good portion of my films have always had a very, very quick schedule, and that's always the hardest part, because sometimes you've got a ridiculous number of days to make. You're shooting something in the times that most movies, this would be like one of their pickup schedule would be your entire schedule. So when they come back to, you're shooting stuff in maybe half, a third, or a quarter of the time that some of the more regular schedules of filmmaking are. And the difficult thing there is that it's not that you don't necessarily know or feel like you could make it better. It's that you don't have the time to waste on a big set. See, the problem is that I've found myself a lot of times, the budget is in this sort of middle ground where it's big enough that there's a lot of producers, there's a studio or a network or some, there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen, so to speak, and people that you have to make happy, and a huge crew in certain aspects. So that doesn't always help you, because when you're trying to make something quickly and you have a big crew of people to move, it's almost like the best analogy I can make is like the more links you put on a train or a bus or something like that, the more cars that it has on the end of it, the harder it is to take a quick turn to the left. You can't just go, okay, wait, I have a great idea. Let's do this. Let's put the camera here. Let's, you could have that idea about how to make it great, or totally improve on a shot or a scene that you're watching and you're like, I don't like this, and I can see why I don't like it, but if I change it right now, we're not going to make our day, and the producers are going to go crazy, and we're, and the whole film could spiral out of control. We have to make this day. We have to get all these shots in by this time, and you just don't have the time to reset or do it or to improve certain things. And even though you might have come in with a good plan, or you've come in with a lot of good ideas, things, all films are like these moving, living, breathing organisms that they change, and you have to be able to adapt and change course with it. You have to be able to collaborate with the people you're working with, and you could get there and it starts to rain and you needed the shot to be sunny, or you could get there and the actors got a completely different vibe going, or mindset, or something about the location isn't what you expected or planned for it to be, or something isn't on set the day that you need it, and you have to be able to adapt to it. And it's just hard when you kind of fall in that middle ground of enough money to get the extra pressure and to make you have more weight on your shoulders when you're working, but not enough money to give you a comfortable schedule to shoot it, and a comfortable a nice amount of padding if something goes wrong, or you see something that you don't like and you want to fix it. So I would say that I always watch my stuff, and it's very hard for me to be happy about the work that I see, just because I'm a perfectionist, and I always it's always like I'm never happy. I get to the point of happy enough, and that's just how you can be, because it's like you're never satisfied with anything you're doing as an artist unless you're somewhat delusional, because I don't know, for me, I just always know how much more I wanted to do with the project, how much more I wanted to accomplish on it. And I always see where I'm not getting done what I wanted to do, as opposed to like enjoying the things that are getting done. So even like people will come up and be like they love something, or they're really happy about something, or the producers will love it, or you watch something with people and you get a lot of good feedback, and I'm just sitting there going, but this should have been that, and this other thing should have been better, and so yeah, it's a black hole of craziness.
Well, that always seems to be the how do I want to word it? The appropriate recipe when it comes to making good films is when everybody's schedule is psychotic, and yet it creates a nice film versus something that has so much free time, the schedule isn't tight, and then you get kind of like crap. But then it's just kind of like what was it? Alien, I think it was. That was shot very tightly, and they didn't think it was gonna be fantastic because of the way they shot it and everything else. But then when you look at the amount of pressure and struggles and challenges that they ran into, it happened to become one of the best sci-fi films ever. And it's just because, it's just because that pressure, it's just like, oh shit, like that pressure is on me. How do I make sure this thing is going to be great and not like a slap in the face? Now,
I agree with that. I totally agree with I don't think things should be made outside of the realm of pressure or outside, because I think there's a lot of healthy pressure that that not only makes people work harder and on their toes, but also like challenges you to overcome ideas and obstacles and things. And I think that's great. It's just it gets to the point of there's like crazy quick schedules, and then there's like impossible schedules. And I'd be happy to move out of the realm of impossible schedules into the realm of crazy quick schedules and work in that space for sure. Sometimes these schedules are just unbelievable. And the problem is when you're successful in that space and you do something in an amount of time that you're not supposed to. Most people shouldn't be able to make something in this amount of time. I mean, I'm talking about movies that are made in either less than 20 or less than 15 days, and it's like, whoa, how did you? It's like we're talking about. I did a movie in 12 days once, and it came out great. The problem is when you do it and you're successful in that space, they go, oh, you can do that. You know what? We don't need to spend more money on more time, because look at how good this last one came out in, and you did it this quickly, and you're like, no. Just give me a little more time. I'll show you. Yes, we made it work, but we could have made it better. We could have done better things. But, it's hard because it really comes down to what people are looking for, what they want out of the film. And me, I want more, but I think that's you'll hear that gripe from a lot of filmmakers. So I'm certainly not alone in that.
No. And, since it is like a nice little segue into like what you're saying to this next question, but, Alex, what are your thoughts or opinion on horror nowadays?
It's interesting. I think it really comes down to I tend to like stuff that is made on a smaller scale. I tend to find horror that kind of comes out of from a place of where it isn't meant to be. I'm not a huge fan of like huge loud noises constantly to try to startle people. I like things that are psychological and that just make you feel uncomfortable and that make you think about them when they're done. And sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, so what you mean by loud noises and stuff is like you're not a fan of like the cheesy Hollywood jump scares, I think is what you're trying. Okay.
That is exactly what I'm saying, yeah. And I like movies. I like, it's like when you go back to like, there's so many movies that come out that have so many unlimited resources. I find, especially with horror, like you go back to movies that just feel like they were made on no budget, and they really unnerve you in ways that are like, again, that doesn't mean to say that like a horror movie made on a budget can't be good. I'm just saying that there's something about some of these more grassroots projects and things that get to the core of what's really scary in a space, or what's really scary about the material that they're working with. And it's very hit or miss. You know, I find a lot of horror on the bigger stage to not scare me at all, but I find a lot of interesting stuff on the smaller scales. And I always like, you know, it's hard because there's so much of it out there. You know, just because it's a small film doesn't mean it's a good film, but there is a lot of really interesting stuff in the world of independent horror film, I think, or at the very least, you know, smaller scale horror films. And again, because I mean, for me, I always find, you know, it's like the less is more sort of mentality of like what you don't see can often be just as scary, if not scarier than, you know, what's flashing in front of your face. So yeah. So I think it's not. I don't think that the state of horror is as good as it has been in the past. But I think there's a lot of smaller movies that are coming up that are starting to find, you know, audiences that are really, really good and really interesting, and that excites me. So
yeah, I agree.
Sorry. Yeah. Oh, cool. Yeah, cool. Sorry.
Well, I was gonna say too is like look at here's another example of jump scares. Is Paranormal Activity. Throughout that entire, I guess I'm gonna call it a franchise now because there's technically 5 of them now, I guess. And I mean, those were. I say the first movie is definitely great. Like usually, any originals are always usually the better than the sequels and what usually comes after that. But then when I watched the last Paranormal Activity, what was that? Ghost Dimension. Right when it got near the end is when I started to go, what am I watching?
Yeah.
It saddens me because, you know, they could have done so much more throughout the franchise, or even if they just left it at the original. And, you know, that's when it comes into play of, you know, that unanswered question. Like a good example is like, I hate to go back to the film again, but it's this franchise that I keep mentioning is always a good example for something. But Alien, when we first see Aliens with that spaceship, the derelict or however you pronounce it, where you see that engineer in the chair and in the middle of this big room, and you're just trying to figure out where the hell did that come from. But then when you look at Prometheus and Alien Covenant in a way, it's almost like it ruined that mystery. It ruins it. I just feel films nowadays, when it comes to like sequels or really anything after the original, it's almost like now they got to answer those unanswered questions because that's what the answer was.
Yeah, it'd be nice if they left things to the imagination. It's sort of like the Star Wars. What's going on with Star Wars, where every thing that was just, you know, like a passing comment in the original films has to become its own side story now. And it's overkill, and you're like, you know, we don't need to see every little thing, like this was cool as a comment or as something we saw off to the side, but as soon as you start to put a magnifying glass on it, it falls apart, and you're taking away from the imagination of it. You're not adding to it, and especially when those things are made specifically on a completely different stage. These are made under the microscope of huge corporations now that are, you know, and look, I'm not bashing. I'm just saying that these guys are, you know, with Star Wars or with Alien, like these are big studios now making these movies that are expecting things out of them, you know, and need this to make money and need to make the toys and the things, and as opposed to like these aren't the artists who are sitting there like coming with really cool ideas and details, and you know, and it just gets like you said, it just becomes overkill. It just becomes this thing where you're actually robbing the project of some of the mystique of it, some of the, like, you want to know what's behind a door in a room in The Shining. We don't need to go now make a sequel where we see inside the door, and it would become completely asinine. So yeah, I'm totally in agreement with you.
Yeah, it's just sad. It's just like, you know, pretty soon it's just everything's gonna be answered, and it's just like, oh yeah, this is this is what they are, and this is what's going to happen. And it's just like, just take the complete fun and mystery again taken right out of it. And pretty soon, like you were just saying with Star Wars, where they gotta do the side stories now and whatever, but pretty soon we gotta watch where every character needs to use the bathroom.
Right.
What next?
No, it's insane. Totally insane. We don't need to see every corner of every inch in under every like inside of every shadow from a film that was successful. It's like, it'd be great if these studios were giving the artists money to make original projects and things, and make new Star Wars and new Alien franchises, because the ideas are great and new and original, as opposed to like continuing on something that has been. It's like, who's going to be making the new ones when all they'll put out is, the next Marvel movie, the next Star Wars movie, the next Jurassic Park, and that's it. You get the next Transformers and the next whatever. Yeah, and that's it. That's all you get. That's all you're gonna get. And they're not gonna put the money behind, let's make a new one. Let's see something new. Let's see a completely new. And the problem is, because that stuff is riskier for them. They have a sure thing in a Marvel movie. They have a sure thing or they used to, at least, in a Star Wars movie. Starting to lose a lot of popularity now, but that's sort of the sure bet that they're willing to put the money into. It's hard when when the things that are original out there, when they're not a franchise, when they're not a comic book, you don't see anything come out like that on a large scale. It's not like you see $100 million budget go into it. I wonder now if the Matrix had never been made, would they make the Matrix today? You know what I mean? Like, would they actually put that kind of money into a movie where they had never seen this kind of stuff before, or they don't know these characters and it's not already pre-existing? Back when the Matrix was originally made, they weren't doing. Not everything that was coming out was a brand new, recycled. They didn't have the formula for a comic book movie, and they were still trying to figure it out. So they were still taking chances on new material. I just sort of doubt that the Matrix would get made today. Instead, they would give those guys, money to make another Star Wars spin-off or one of the comic book franchises that they've got already, firmly in hand. So it's a little disconcerting in that space.
Not to interrupt you, but that's like to kind of go with what you're saying, is the risk is not there. Like, they're not taking that risk to make something, because they gotta focus. They're focusing on stuff that we already know, and then they gotta rehash it, or whether it be book form, movie form, whatever, really. Like, they just like, another example is Christine. They're going to be revamping Christine now, and what's the other one? Firestarter. Right.
I know. It's hard. It's really hard to find. Yeah. It's hard to find that original stuff.
Yeah. The originality is no longer seems to be in Hollywood's head. Kind of like,
and that is the sad thing, because the risks are what make things really special. When people are able to go out on a limb and try something that you've never seen before. Like, that's some of the beauty of watching a movie, or it used to be, at least. The things that made these movies popular in the first place was the fact that, when they first came out, you had never seen anything like this. And now it's very hard to find anything that you haven't seen before. It's just, that's the biggest thing.
I think that, like, original, like, movies and concepts should be left alone. Like, people can't come up with, like, original things anymore, and there's no mystery. Like, it's stuff that we've already seen, and it's like, what makes you think we really want to see the same thing? Why can't you come up with something new? There's, like, it's stuff that we've already seen and know about, and there's no mystery to it anymore.
Right. No, I agree with you, and it's not really. I don't think it's that people can't come up with this stuff. I just think that it's that they don't get the opportunity to necessarily make it. And so if you're trying to make something, look, it's not like I've been in a lot of meetings, and I've been in studio meetings. I've been in agency and management meetings, and the more you sort of stray from what people know, the harder it is to get the thumbs up to do it. And when you look at the stuff that ends up being super hyper successful, I mean, even like in the TV world, like look how many, like when Breaking Bad finally came out and people hadn't seen somebody who's quote unquote a villain in the making be the sort of hero of the story. Look how many people said no to that before it got greenlit as a TV show, and that had a pretty established creator and showrunner, and he got turned down everywhere. He got turned down everywhere before AMC gave him the go ahead, and it's amazing. Like by really great by networks that take chances on things even, but just because they had never seen anything like it, they didn't know. Like I can tell you that they all want to say that they want to try something different, but it has to be something that they kind of know as the same. So they want to see something that they already know packaged as something different, but it really, when it's actually different, when it's actually taking a risk, when it's actually going out on a limb, it is really hard to get people to understand what you're saying, because the people who greenlight, and look, and this is not a shot at anybody. Look, I've sat in on meetings. It's very hard sometimes when you're not the person who's created the material or who has it in your head to visualize what's being pitched and what's being sold to you. So if you can't say it's kind of like The Matrix, but it's going to be like this, and like if you can't say that, people have a really hard time understanding it, and they have a hard time visualizing it. As soon as you say The Matrix, they're like, oh, no, I know what you're saying now. I get it. That's what I want. Okay, cool. So make it like The Matrix. But it's like, yeah, but no, I don't want to do The Matrix. I want to do something different. It's just that you get into a space where you sort of have to pitch things like something else, or the money just doesn't necessarily turn up. It's just, or the only, that's why a lot of successful things come. I will say this about horror. I think it's the space where the most original work can come out now, because I think on a low budget level, horror works as well as anything else, if not better, than big Hollywood films. So the reason why you see more franchises launched out of horror now is because that's where creative ideas and edgy, that's where filmmakers can, on a very low budget, do things that are appealing to a mainstream audience, but also take risks and try things that are different and go out on a limb and show the world something it hasn't seen before. And when it works on that small scale, then Hollywood eats it up and says, okay, let's make another Purge, let's make another Saw movie, let's make another Paranormal Activity, let's make another Blair Witch, whatever it is. But they're grabbing it from these small movies that were made on this very small scale, where they didn't have the studio pressure, they didn't have to make it like Halloween or the next this or the next that. They could make their own movie. And I think horror is probably the genre that has the biggest ability to be made on a small scale and launch new franchises. You can't you can make a sci-fi movie on a small scale, but it has to be a very smart, down to earth kind of sci-fi movie, like a Primer or something like that. But that's totally different than, it's not like you're making Avatar on a small scale and launching a brand new, like that's just not going to be successful, because it's going to look like crap when you make it for under $1 million. It's just not going to work. But so those movies have to be really smart, and sometimes those movies don't have the same kind of appeal to some of the more mainstream audiences. But when you actually look at like horror, those can really work. And I think that's one of the great things about the genre, because on a very low budget space, where I think in most cases, I think most people agree that a low budget horror movie can be just as scary, if not scarier, and almost not 9 times out of 10 will be scarier than a big budget horror movie. And that's not to say that there aren't scary big budget movies out there. I'm just saying that it's almost a level playing field when it comes to horror. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's that it's that potential of what you were saying earlier. They don't have that pressure of a big studio on them, so they can freely do what their vision is and how they want to execute it versus, we'll say, like a bigger studio that probably wants 20 different things.
That's right. And also the other thing about a horror is like they don't have to have a famous person in the lead role. Like sometimes that's actually bad for the movie. Sometimes it's better in a horror movie that you don't recognize the people, that they're not somebody that you know already, because it makes it scarier already to feel like this could be, there's something real about this. There's something real about what I'm watching, and that's what can really move and scare people. Because I mean, you go back to like the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre and the one that they made with all the, who I'm actually friends with, really close with one of the stars of that movie. But like that, you know, when they remade that movie, it's just the gloss on it. It's just a completely different vibe than like watching something that feels like, I don't know, there's something very real and organic about how creepy the original was, you know. And when you watch that, you're like, oh my gosh, that is like, there's something really demented about that space. Like that feels evil. There's something really evil there, and it's hard to feel that when you're watching like all these like super beautiful movie stars who you know are sitting in their trailers in between takes. And I mean, yeah, you can have fun in those movies. I find, you know, big budget horror movies can be a lot of fun to watch. I just don't necessarily feel like I go home and I'm scared, or I don't want to, you know, I don't want to take a shower because I'm going to get killed, or, you know, like I don't want to open my like, you just don't have that feeling when you're like, oh, I had some fun, you know, the audience screamed a couple times. I'm never going to think about that movie again.
No, I agree, and it's funny because I think you're the first person I heard you bring up like what you just said about having a familiar face in a horror movie can actually be a buzzkill. I completely agree with that. And a friend of mine and I were talking about like Brad Pitt being in like World War Z. We were talking like, what if Brad Pitt was not in World War Z? Like, how much more better could the movie have been if Brad Pitt wasn't in the damn movie? Could everybody know Brad Pitt? So
right, exactly. No, it's exactly true. It's like you just it's. I think it's part of the reason why when you look at like how Universal Studios has tried to relaunch this like dark universe, they've had a hard time because they're casting movie stars and they're trying to do like, you know, big budget monster movies, but that's, you know, it's a different thing than horror. Like that's not going to appeal to the horror fans and the horror audience. You don't need to see Tom Cruise running around with the Mummy and Russell Crowe and all these, you know, like that's just not going to be the thing that inspires, you know, horror audiences. It might have back in the day when all there was Dracula and Frankenstein, and those are cool. I am not saying anything against that stuff because it's like I grew up loving monster movies. Like I was obsessed with monster movies and horror movies when I was a kid, and some of the, you know, I was watching some of the I was a fan of all those creatures and things. I couldn't have been any more obsessed with that stuff. There was a store near my house, apartment in New York City where I grew up, called Forbidden Planet, and they just always had, you know, monster masks and monster toys and monster books in the windows. And when I would go to school, I'd see it every single day. I would want to go into that store and I'd be obsessed with it. So those things are really cool and they can be fun, but that's just not what horror is now or today. And I think it's not what's going to appeal to horror audiences. And I think that's part of the reason why they've struggled so badly to find the market for what they're trying to build in this. I think they'd have to totally reimagine, you know, what they want the dark universe to be, and not be trying to hang their hats on movie stars and big budget, you know, monster action. That's an action film. It's not a horror film. And they're sort of having a hard time finding, you know, the middle ground for it. And I think they're sending out mixed messages with what they want to accomplish, what they're trying to accomplish with that stuff. So
yes, I agree with all of that. I agree
I
with all.
second that.
Huh?
I second that.
You second that?
Yes. How did you land with Marvista Entertainment?
Well, that film in Marvista, I had just done a movie for Lionsgate called Altitude. I happened to be playing with my dog in the park, and I got a call from one of the producers on that film who said, "Hey, I know those guys over at Marvista they've been looking for a director for this movie. They've gone through a ton. They haven't found anybody that they want yet. I'm going to send them your stuff. Like, don't get your hopes up, because literally they've said no to, X number of, I don't know, like 100 people. But just want to let you know I'm sending your stuff in, and I'll keep you posted." And I was like, "All right, cool, great." And I sent them some of my more horror like projects if they wanted to take a look at some of that stuff. And then the next morning I got a call and I said, "Hey, they loved it. They want to meet with you." And I met with a guy named Neil Ellman, who's the writer. He's also the producer and an executive over at Marvista. And Neil is just was amazing. Like like I said, I've done 8 movies, and I work with a lot of producers and a lot of different people. And Neil has been just an amazing person to work with, because he just understands, like, for somebody who is an executive at a studio, right, over at Marvista, like, he's somebody he's like a VP over there, right? He really cares about the right things when it comes to the project. He cares that he's not just trying to make a project that's going to, he's not looking at it from numbers. And I mean, he respects those things because he has to, otherwise you don't get to make another movie if your projects aren't successful, if they don't find the right, if they don't hit the right marks. But so those things are certainly important, and he understands them, but he also really cares about the quality in the right ways. And it was really cool to me, because once we sat down and met, and we hit it off and agreed to work on the project together, there would be times where we would go through the writing process or the casting process. And I've found in the past where, like, an executive or a producer, once, a network or a studio approves of something, they're just like, "Hey, we're not going to keep working on this. Like, they've already approved. So, anything else, like, to keep pushing this or to keep working on it is risky, because what if they don't like the changes that you're making? Or what if they don't or if they approve a cast member, let's just cast that cast member, because, you can't, it's hard to get 6 people, who at a network to approve something, and when they've approved it, let's just say yes. But if I would be like, "No, that person's not right, or this needs work." And he totally agreed and cared about, like, making the right project and he would just listen to the arguments and that doesn't mean he says yes to everything, but the things he doesn't say yes to, I always know he's coming from the right place. So it just turned into, like, a great working relationship for me, because I'd never really found a producer who's like, really, their head is exactly where it needs to be with the material, and they're just very straightforward, very honest, and they care about the material in the right way. I think he's going to be, like, he's new to Marvista, and I think he's really going to, I think he's been there for now about 1.5 years, but I think he's really going to do a lot of cool things over there. So
it's always good to find the right people. I starred in a short story horror film. Well, it was like an anthology with 3 tales, but I was the cameraman in the last story. And, not only was it like a found footage, but, the guy, to make it short, he contacted me because I run a page on Facebook called Haunted Vermont. And this was like back in 2013, I believe. And he was looking for one more location to use for his movie, because he was trying to base it off of real haunted places here in Vermont. And so I said, "Hey, I know a guy. I know this place is, like, it said they're haunted because it had some stories in it, and I'll see what I can do." So I got a hold of my friend, and I got a hold of a number for him to contact about possibly getting in there for the last tale of his film. When we went there to film, because he invited me on to be a actor, and I was just like, Okay. Thank you. I flat out told him, I said, I don't know how well I'm going to do because I'm not really good at, I guess, acting unless you tell me something to do something, but also try to tell me, like, let me also try things too, which I find is to be important as well. In order to make a good movie, you need to have the right people, but you also need that right director to kind of push you to tell you, like, this is what I want, but also at the same time it's just like, if you can think of something too that would help bring out more of a, lack of a better word, like a emotional scare or anything really, like this, like add it. Even though some people say, we interviewed Bill Ober Jr. He was telling us that sometimes he does things that the director doesn't want, but they'll usually keep the take. But then he was saying, like, it's always good to not be that quote unquote robot, to actually, try something different to see if it works, I guess is what I'm trying to say as well.
Yeah. Well, I totally agree with you. I mean, like, I personally encourage, the thing is filmmaking is such a collaboration. It's not made in the bubble. You can't do everything by yourself as a filmmaker. You need to know how to work with other people, and of course, you have to have the ability to communicate and what you're trying to achieve. But I don't think I'm someone who I'm very careful when I'm casting. I like to cast, smart actors and people who will bring something extra to the material, and I always encourage them to, like, talk to me about if you want to make, if there's something you don't agree with, if you don't like something, like, let's work it out. Let's make this work for you. Let's make this great, and I want to hear their ideas. I want to hear, I want to see things that are interesting or different than maybe I've thought. A lot of times with my ideas, I think it's one of the things I like to do is, I've got a lot of ideas. I know what I want to accomplish, but a lot of times I will wait to hear what other people are saying or thinking or hearing, because I want to see their ideas first. I don't want to put a ceiling on their ideas. Like, at the very least, if their ideas aren't, or if they need help, or if they want something from me, or if they're asking me for something, I'm able to answer those questions. If they want, but at the same time, I want to see what their ideas are. Maybe their ideas are better. Maybe they have thought of something that I haven't thought of, or maybe it's just something really interesting that takes us down a whole new path that and you have to be open to that kind of stuff. So for me, I like to use my ideas more like a safety net rather than like, this sort of like Bible that they have to follow every rule and step that I'm saying. I don't want to box my actors in. I want to inspire them to do their best work and think of new ideas and come up with great things, and then capture those great things and sort of shape them to what we need to do for the film itself. So sometimes their ideas might be great, but not quite fit what we need to do for the movie. But if you just go, okay, that's really cool, let's make a couple adjustments to make this actually work for what we're trying to accomplish. And the great thing about that is ultimately, like, I want my actors to feel connected to their characters, to connected to the material, feel like a part of the process, understand it as much as possible, and own their characters and own, a piece of the movie themselves, so that they can really, like, when they're on screen, there's no question about, they're not saying some line that they don't understand or doing some action that doesn't make sense to them. They are who they need to be, and they are in the moment, and they are, and to me, that just creates such a better performance, and it makes the film that much better. So I'm always open to adjusting for that space. I think some of the biggest mistakes for directors are when they try to control things that are just, you have to be able to read the situation. It's sort of, I always look at filmmaking sort of like being the captain of a ship in a way, because you can plot a course, but the waves might take you a different direction. If you still try to go the same way that you're trying to go, but the weather is saying no, you're going to sink your ship. You have to be able to go with the waves. You have to be able to go with the wind. You have to be able to, like, adjust accordingly and make the best. If you want to get to your destination, you've got to be able to adjust. You have to be able to take into account, you have to read the weather, you have to read the crew and the needs of the people that you're working with, and that's the only way you're going to get where you need to be. Do you know what I'm saying? So yeah, I think that's one of the beautiful things about filmmaking for me is, it's a collaboration. It's about appreciating the people you're working with, and that's why it's really important to pick people that you really, that fit in the mold of the things that you're trying to accomplish. And then from there, it's all about fostering a really creative environment for everybody to do their best work, and inspiring people to do their best work, and not just dictating you're going to do this or you're going to do that, or this is how it's going to be. I mean, of course, there are times where it'll come down to disagreements and things, and there has to be a final word in it, and that's, but you have to be open to the process of collaboration when you're working with people. I find that the directors that make the biggest mistakes are the ones that are too ego-driven. They think that it's their way or the highway, and they try to almost give line reading to actors, or box in every little detail of what's going to happen. And sometimes that stuff doesn't fit when you get to set, and sometimes those ideas don't jive with the people that you're working with, and ultimately what you get is a much less sincere performance, or something that isn't as good as it probably could have been had they been open to the actual art of collaboration.
No, exactly what you said. Like that actually reminds me now of when you were talking about sharing ideas and stuff, and you want to hear them. That reminds me of when I shared an idea once with that same short story that I was in. We were trying to film a specific part. I don't want to go too much into details, especially for you, Alex, because I'll send you the link to the YouTube afterwards if you'd like to see the film that I was in.
I'd love to. Yeah, that'd be great.
And but so without giving too much away, and I'm gonna try my darnest to do so, is there was a part where I'm trying to film through a doorway, and this scene is trying to happen, but what happens is the other actor was tripping over the other person. So it got to the point where it was just like, okay, how can we make this work so that it looks more, not just dull, but more creepy? And so I'm thinking, and I said, I look at the director at the time, and I said, what if we did it like this? Where I don't really know how if I want to say it, but otherwise you probably wouldn't get what I'm trying to say. But let's put it this way. In the hallway, there's a certain scene that happened, but let's just say, just to make it more mystery, is this whole scene to me is mystery now. Once I suggested it, and they liked it, and it was the fact that I said, well, what if we move the body? He kind of looks at me and goes, what do you mean? I said during the scene, let's just move the body as the scene is playing out, and we'll see what it does. And when you watch it, it's kind of one of those like it's to me anyway, it was like, like there's something going on here more than just what I'm seeing. So there's something else going on, or it's like we were just talking about it. I tried to make it so that I question the viewer, like where I'm like, do you see what you're seeing? And if so, are you questioning it? Like is this by this one specific person, or is there more to what we're not being seen? And that's the way I'm gonna leave it. But yeah, that
makes sense. That's cool.
Yeah.
I think that improvisation should be allowed, because about 3 years ago, I used to be a part of my cousin's haunted house, and he actually strongly encouraged us to just run with it and just improv and come up with our own ideas, and it actually felt more natural to do it that way rather than plan something out and it feel like it's rehearsed. There's
Totally.
no natural flow for it. And
Totally. I always make an effort to try to find actors who are good at it. It doesn't always work out, but I try to find actors who are good at at improvising. Because the big thing about improvising is what it shows you in the project is that the person who's playing this character isn't playing a character. They are so in tune and in touch with what the material is that anything can happen in the scene, and as the character, and they're able to adjust, and they know the world so well that they have so many ideas about it, and to them it's just a much more complete world. It's a more complete space, and that translates to the audience. Whereas if you just have somebody who's reading lines and they don't know anything past what's on the page, they don't know anything beyond what they're being told to say, they don't know anything that happened in the next room or that happened before this started or that's going to happen after the scene ends. Like if you don't know your characters that way, to me that's something that the audience can see, and that's what I always find to be one of the big, like, an audience is guided through a movie through the people on screen, and if you can't connect with the people, if you don't believe them, if you don't believe they're in that space, you start to really realize this is a film. And that's the quickest way to not be scared in the movie, is to be thinking about how this is a movie. And to see the seams of the filmmaking process, to see that it doesn't, this is an actor, and that's a set, and that's fake blood, and there's nothing that's going to be less scary than being, very aware that that's what's going on. And that goes to what we were saying before about, recognizable faces, because, it's hard to lose yourself in a character that when you're seeing, like I'm supposed to be seeing the character, but I'm seeing Tom Cruise. I'm not seeing the character. Like, it's hard for me, but that can be fun when you're watching an action movie, because you like seeing, so-and-so in an action scene. Some people might want to see The Rock, and they don't care that he's not an actual, okay, I like they might like that. They might like seeing The Rock, and that's fun for them, but that's not going to let you get lost in the atmosphere and the moment of a movie and actually be truly scared. It's all you see is The Rock and you don't see, you don't see the character that's supposed to be in that room by themselves, where some danger is about to, take place. So yeah, I agree with you guys completely.
When you were filming House of the Witch, was filming in it any different than any of your previous films?
Yeah, I'd say I would say this about all movies. They're always unique. What I really loved about this movie in particular was the house itself was sort of like a dream location to film in. It was a house that had been abandoned, shut down in the 80s. In the late 80s, hadn't been lived in, but had a really rich history to it. And it was called the Anita Madden House. And we filmed it in Kentucky. But I mean, this place is sort of a legendary, creepy old manor that everybody in the area is very aware of. And there have been many deaths and in the house itself, a lot of very creepy. There were rooms where it's like, yeah, this is the room where the first owner shot himself. This is the room where, there were some really, really creepy things to it. And, as we walked through the house itself, it just felt, it's like one of those places where it's like you want, it's the kind of creepy old house you really do want to explore when you see them. Like, and I've always, it's fun making movies on sets and building sets and doing that kind of stuff. But it's a whole different thing when you really get to work in a space like that you just can't create the kind of history and the kind of the kind of haunts that actually exist in a space like that this has its own, there are people who will not go into that house after certain times by themselves. And there's a caretaker on the grounds who's like, oh yeah, a lot of, he won't, and there were lots of creepy things that happened, in and around the house, even after we wrapped the house, the shoot, where I remember one time we had to go and pick up a vehicle from the house, and it was the first time I went with one other person, and there was nobody there, and all the lights and the crew, everybody's gone, and it was extraordinarily, you feel a completely different kind of vibe and energy when you're in a situation like that. And it's really it's a really cool experience to have that, and to be able to like feel the power of these spaces that you're filming in. I would say that was, especially as someone who's excited about, creepy things, like it's sort of a dream location in that sense, because it's just that you can't replicate that by building a set. You can't. It's not the same thing when you go into a sound stage and the walls are fake, and it's just a totally different vibe. And when you're scouting, or when you're or when you're rehearsing with some of the actors and stuff, and sometimes we would go down there just to like really feel some of the creepy vibes of it. And one of the like one of our actresses, like when she wanted to get herself really scared and get herself prepared for a scene, especially like the most scary scenes that she'd have to do, like she would go and lock herself in like the room where the guy killed himself and just like prepare herself and get really just like, you just can't replicate that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? So it was a really cool experience from that standpoint, for sure. And yeah, I mean, overall it was a lot of fun. I have to say that like it's sort of the kind of dream type of shoot, in that sense. It's the kind of thing you always want to do when you're growing up watching horror movies. It's like, this is the kind of town, and that's the kind of house I've always wanted to film in. You know what I mean? So it was fun, for sure.
How were you able to film inside the abandoned mansion?
Oh, well, I mean, we, our producers went and got the permits to do it. So it's not like we broke into the house ourselves and set up shop there. But luckily, we had some good producers who were able to, work out a deal with the owners of the house. I mean, because even though people own it, even though it's abandoned, it's owned by an estate. When we were location scouting it, we were going through and we were down by the main entrance, the main gate, which is just like so creepy. And we were like going through the schedule, and there's sort of a team of people working, and a car just pulls up, and they're like, and he just starts like yelling at us, like, you guys are killing, like, because he thought we were there to he thought that we were a bunch of contractors there to like renovate the house and like do all these, like, so it was like one of those weird things where like the town protective of this crazy old estate that nobody lives in, and he just like, it was a really weird experience. Like, he got in the face of one of the guys and was acting really aggressive and creepy. It was weird. It was a weird thing. I had, outside of that, which was cool in a weird way, just to get a sense of like how important this house is to the the people who live in that town. I had a really creepy experience where when we were location scouting, there's a room in the attic, the witch's sort of den, the lair that she's at. And I was there, and I was doing like a FaceTime because I wanted to show a friend of mine, the location. And, I was there with about 4 people doing the location scout. As I was like showing them, I could see somebody walking up to me out of my peripheral. And I was just like, I didn't look over at them. I just kind of held up my finger like, hey, I'll be right with you. Just give me 1 second. Because it was very clear to me. And then when I looked over, there was nobody there. And I looked out the window, and I saw the entire team had been outside waiting for me to come out. And there was absolutely nobody in the house. And it was one of those, like, I definitely saw somebody walking up to me out of my peripheral, and that just gave me the shivers. I was like, whoa, what the heck was that? Because I've never really had an experience like that before. So I wasn't expecting it. I wasn't looking for it. I wasn't creeped out or scared or like, thinking something's going to happen in here while I wasn't like inviting some weird experience. I was just trying to show somebody a cool location on FaceTime. And I just didn't, I just literally was like, hey, give me 1 second, because I didn't want to, I was like talking to them on my phone. So I like held my hand out to the side to say, give me 1 sec. And when I looked over, was nobody there. And I was like, oh, wow, that's really creepy.
Jeez, these stories are actually great, to the point where, Alex, that you're actually kind of keep going on with the next question, which I'll just say it anyway, but you've been throwing out stories anyway. But Because the next question was, at any point in time did the abandoned building come to life? Which clearly it did to you.
Yeah. Well, I
So-
can give you another story. I can give you another one for sure that was not my story, but this is from my director of photography who after we wrapped the film he was on the set. He basically said he started getting these really weird. First of all, everybody who was like wrapping out their equipment was starting to get weird things, like they were hearing weird things. They were seeing things, hearing things, feeling weird in the space, and so he had been told this by some of the other crew members, but didn't think too much about it. But then he kind of like basically got all the rest of his gear, went out onto the steps, and those doors, there's no way for wind to blow those doors because of the way that they open.
Now, we talking the front door?
The front door. So
okay.
What he said was he started to feel this really weird kind of like he kind of got goosebumps all of a sudden, and he basically said he walked outside with his gear and turned around and he like thanked that, he kind of like goofily like thanked the house, for a good shoot or whatever. And there was nobody else around, and the door just slammed on him. And he was so freaked out by it. He told me the story right before I told you I had to go retrieve this. He goes like, "Hey man, be really careful. This is what happened to me." So yeah, it's interesting. Like, there were definitely lots of stories and lots of people seeing and feeling and hearing things. I didn't experience much more than what I told you, but everybody seemed to have their own story. It was interesting for sure. It's definitely the kind of place that if you were there, I don't know, it's really hard to explain. You feel a different energy, it's like you feel a different kind of power in that space, and you can kind of feel some of the weird sadness of some of the people that have been there before. Some of the, it just doesn't, it just doesn't feel like a shell of a space. It feels like there's something more to the space. And I haven't had many of those experiences before. I've always sort of wanted to, like I watch shows that, where I've always wanted to, like explore abandoned, like, insane asylums and like that stuff's always really creepy to me. But I've never really had the experience of like actually going to one of these places and feeling like, there's like a different sort of air. There's like a different energy here. It's really weird. But it's cool. It's cool to experience for sure.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but before I forget, I'll start filling in with some stories too. But first of all, Alec, I don't know if you're familiar with our state, Vermont, but back a long time ago, 1800s, I'm going to say, because I forget exactly what year it was, but we had a guy from New York come to Vermont to try to debunk what is known here as two people by the name the Eddy brothers. And just to give you a short version, the Eddy brothers had they were gifted because I have an EVP that I caught like almost 3 years now or so ago, where I believe it's one of the brothers trying to correct me. But anyway, they developed, I did it again. They were gifted the supernatural like abilities and at a young age. So what happened was their parents sold them to the traveling circus because they were different. And then when they came back to live in Vermont, because that's where they wanted to settle down, they opened up their very own Green Mountain Inn, where if you came to their inn to stay the night, they would, in fact, perform for you. And it could be anything. And because there were so many different performances that they did for their guests, So we had this guy, Henry Steele Occult, who heard about the Eddie Brothers from New York, and he was like a known journalist or something from New York. Well, he wanted to come here to Chittenden, Vermont, and debunk the Eddie Brothers because they were getting so much popularity back then in the newspapers that I guess this guy Henry wanted to debunk them because he thought it was nothing but smoke and mirrors. If you actually go on Amazon or anywhere where you can possibly find this book, I say Amazon because it's like really the best known way to get this book, and it's called People from the Other World. And what this book is it's his experiences and his notes and drawing everything that he saw, witnessed, and tried to do to debunk the Eddie Brothers. So when after the performance was done by the Eddie Brothers, he would try to debunk what they did, but every time he tried to debunk them, he could not debunk them.
Whoa.
By the end of the week that he stayed there, he ended up calling Vermont the spirit capital of the universe. So I would recommend anybody that even listens, or Alex here, since you like that, seems to like this kind of stuff, People from the Other World by Henry S. Occult. If you can find that book, get it, because I guarantee you it'll amaze you. Once again, Alex, I hope I don't make you jelly with this either, like I did with somebody else. But I used to do paranormal investigation, and during my filming with Dead Static, when I was on the final tale and stuff, because before the short story, I was actually invited to do a tour with myself and two other people. It was one of the people who contacted me and then his buddy. So just three of us in there. And this is like a pretty big building too. And so they were telling me stories of like what went on here, or what they even found and stuff like that. And that there is something there at that building that we shot in, and even though I already knew that ahead of time, but when I was filming with them, I remember one time I had to go into the building myself, and this is probably about this time of day right now for me, 6:30, and I had to go up to where we were filming, which is the floor that nobody else is really allowed to be. And but we got special permission. But when I was going up there, I heard something when I was coming downstairs after grabbing something. It almost sounded like a child's laughter, because this building used to be a hospital for patients that had a disease that I can never pronounce anyway. But anyway, so I heard like what sounded like a child's laughter, and I turn around because I'm just used to this by now. But it's almost like the way the sun, and I mean the sun wasn't really coming in too much between the light and the shadows, but I don't know the name of the old shoes that kid used to wear, but the only best way to put it as is like pilgrim shoes, like those type of shoes.
Right.
And
like the clogs or something. What do you mean? Or is it? Oh, yeah.
The little like a waist, or whatever, like a buckle that goes across.
Oh yeah, I can see with the buckle. Yeah. I know you're talking about. No.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that's what it looked like I was seeing, but only in a little kid. Like it's almost like a little kid were trying to manifest itself in front of me, but all I could see was like two little legs with those type of shoes, and I'm just thinking to myself, okay, and then I just walked down like, did I really just see that, or my mind playing tricks on me? And
That's cool.
so, and then there was another time where we finally got done with the movie, and we're probably still there at like 8 o'clock at night. Like, it's dark out and everything, but then all of a sudden everybody started to hear something, whether it was like giggling or something, and one person actually thought that they had their shirt tugged, kind of like like a little kid would do, like tug to kind of play.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it was just so cool to witness that. And then like everybody, kind of like you guys, everybody had a story. It was really cool.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. That's cool. Wow.
and
Crazy.
and then one story I'll quickly add in, which I'm wondering if you had any of these, if you encountered this at all. But when you guys were either filming or taking stills or anything, did your equipment just ever decide to just fail on you? Because that's what happened
Man.
to us. We
Trying to
had
think of that. I'm sure that it did. I'm just trying to think. You know, when I'm on set, it's kind of hard to remember those incidents
no, it's
because
fine.
yeah.
Because I had like
feel
a
like for sure it did though.
and full batteries, and the next thing I know, it's just like this camera doesn't want to work. Like, it doesn't want to take pictures, they want to shut off on its own, and then next thing you know, it's like all the batteries are drained, and it's just like I just barely in. So
Wow.
yeah, that's
Crazy.
that's some of the stuff that happened with me.
Well, one year I was an asylum nurse, and I was standing on the stairs, in the middle of the stairs, and I was all by myself in the stairwell, and I got pushed.
Oh.
Like backward, like back onto the stairs. I got pushed. So I got pushed down, and I was sitting to like a sitting position on the stairs, like, and I was like, what the hell? And I'm like looking around, and there's nothing there. So I'm just like, oh, well, okay.
Yikes.
And
that's
actually
creepy.
And actually, the next year that I did the haunted house, I was a witch, and I was kneeling on the floor in my circle in my room, and people were taking pictures of me, and there was like this mist around me that people were capturing, and then it would just go away.
Just to clarify, there was no smoke machine whatsoever to cause this mist, right?
No, but then again,
but we do what we do, right?
Stuff like that, yeah.
Exactly. But yeah, Alex, you don't recall anything, like any technical problem with any type of camera?
You know, I am certain there was. It's just it's hard for me to be specific about it because like I'm certain that there was equipment failure. Because I definitely recall having to deal with certain things. Oh yeah, we had generators go out for sure while we were filming or right about to film, and all the power would just go out. I mean, we definitely had situations like that. It's just it's like hard for me to when I'm in the middle of like shooting all day, and it's like it's not a personal experience. It's just more like a mass experience for everybody on set. It's hard for me to keep it like specific in my head. You know what I mean? It's hard to remember those specific beats just because there's just so many. Like it's like, oh great, generator just went out, but like I'm not thinking about, oh that's weird that the generator. But yeah, for sure we definitely had some equipment failure in times. I wouldn't really be able to give you good story about it.
You had props come in, but you actually had some props that were already inside the abandoned mansion already. I
mean, there were things for certain that were left behind there that were weird. When we went down to that basement, it was really odd. The only thing in that basement was that wheelchair facing the window, just where it was. Like we didn't move it at all because it was so cool and creepy, just the way it was. And it's just like this big empty room with these windows and this wheelchair that looks like it's just sitting right by it looks like a ghost is sitting in this wheelchair looking out the window. It was a really weird, creepy thing. Like, why is this wheelchair just sitting here like this, perfectly placed right by this window? in this giant room where there's nothing else. And in the way that it was sort of facing the window, it was just like, I can send you a photo of it. I mean, it is the way it is in the film, but there was nothing else in the room. There were other things there, definitely. We did bring in most of the furniture and stuff, and set the dressing like that, but we found a bunch of creepy things in that space, and like light fixtures and weird, there was a bunch of weird stuff there. There was actually one cool thing was when we went into the basement, there was a giant safe room it was like a wine cellar inside of a safe, and it was a huge collection of wine, but most of the bottles were still there. And what we found out was that, and they were all like, covered in dust, and some of them broken. And we found out that the owner, one of the owners of the house, had basically poisoned specific, he placed a couple of poisoned bottles amongst his entire collection, so that his staff and people wouldn't try to steal any of the wine down there. So there were poison bottles in there, and that's why everybody just left everything there in that wine cellar. But it was all like falling apart and really weird and creepy. So yeah.
Wow.
But we did, yeah. That was a really cool thing, just to because those bottles were. You certainly understood why nobody wanted to touch any of that stuff. But yeah, no, it was but for the most part, we brought in and dressed the majority of the location.
Nice. It sounded like you had some challenges when you were filming House of the Witch.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, the weather was extraordinarily windy. That entire house didn't have any power in it, and it's a very large house. So we had to bring in all the generators and stuff, and to move stuff around in there. And we were filming at a certain point. We're filming nights entirely. So we were there all night, almost every night, and running around this dark house. I mean, we had to obviously light it ourselves and put up lights for people so they didn't get hurt. But it was definitely challenging in that regard. I mean, the space itself was enormous. It was a mansion, and like to get all this heavy equipment upstairs and up and down and through narrow spaces and corridors and without lighting, without electricity, because you have to run wiring through the entire place whenever you want to light things up. Yeah, that was pretty challenging. And also shooting nights is challenging because, I mean, a house that size, you can't black out the windows really. You can do it on the ground floor, but when you really want to, like, if the scene takes place at night and you have to shoot on the second, third, or one of the top floors, it's not that easy to just go and black things out, and that becomes really challenging because nights are obviously a lot shorter than days. So when you only have 7 or 8 hours of nighttime, right, and you're on a 12-hour shoot, that's several hours of light that you have, or you're always fighting to get stuff done before the light comes up, especially when you're in places that you can't make dark because of the scope. Because it was such a huge house. It was you could black out certain spaces and make them look like night during the day, but in general, most of these rooms are huge, and a lot of them were on upper levels. So that's certainly a challenge in and of itself. So, and it was a quick schedule as well. This one was shot in 15 days, and
Nice.
that's always a tough thing to do. So we built. We dug that the drowning pit in the backyard. And we created that, and it's filming stuff in and around a drowning pit. You got in the dark, in the mud, and in the water, and you got smoke and steam pumping through the place, and it's just that was really tough. Shooting the stuff in and around that was really, really difficult. We had to make these pits, the end where one of the characters climbs through the ground, and I mean that stuff's not easy. It's not that not so easy to be running around in those giant places. And there's obviously wildlife out there as well, ticks and other not so fun bugs and creatures that you got to deal with. But snakes, we had a lot of snakes on our set. We would find giant snakes and snake skins in the basement. So yeah, that was fun. We had, but all par for the course. I mean, movie making in general tends to be difficult, and I'd say, most people find their fair share of like horror stories when they're trying to, navigate a tough schedule. It's going to happen,
Yeah, that would like with us, like I would mention in a few minutes ago about failing equipment. We had it down to once we took a battery into the house, it seemed like whatever was in it was draining it to the point where it wanted to try to manifest itself, but it got to the point where they had to bring it. When they went home for like the week, because we kind of shot it during the weekend when we could all really get together and stuff, and we came to the conclusion, or they came to the conclusion, that they needed at least four batteries for their camcorder. Depending on where we were, the factor their battery would drain it. It was weird because it was just like that certain specific area was only taking the battery life. So I kind of went on them. I think it's because something is drawing the life away because it wants to manifest itself. Like I guess it's been a while for whatever this is to have like energy, so it probably wants to manifest itself or something. So, but yeah, they always had to keep at least 4 fully charged camcorder batteries every time.
Yeah, that's cool. That's crazy. Yeah, I mean, I've definitely heard of stories like that where the batteries start draining for no reason out of the blue. I'm certain stuff like that happened for us too. It's just that I probably wouldn't,
you probably
I've got so many things on my plate that people weren't coming to me every time a battery drained or something, So, but I, like I said, everybody had creepy stories and things that they were really, unnerved by that happened on set. So there was no shortage of stuff like that.
Well, I know this wasn't during the film, but I do have another cool story. So I ended up meeting this other guy who likes to go and research and take photos of abandoned buildings. And I told him about this building that I was talking to you about, where we filmed in and stuff. And I told him, I said, you're gonna need extra batteries. And he just like, what? And I'm like, dude, trust me, you're gonna need extra batteries. I told him, I said, how well do you know your camera? And he's like, pretty well. Why? And I'm like, because this building is gonna question what you know about that camera. And he kind of looked at me and goes, what? Kind of like, like what?
Yeah.
So I didn't really tell him anything about the building, except for what I just said, is that this building's going to question your camera. And I think the way I said it kind of made him go like, what the hell is he talking about? So when we got there, his camera was fine. But as soon as we entered the building itself and started walking around, that's when me and the two other people that were there started laughing when his camera started to fail, because we didn't say anything, we just laughed. But then at certain areas the camera was fine, but except for certain areas. But then when we came back out of the house, I looked at him and I said, I think on behalf of me and the other two here, I think I can personally say that the reason why we were laughing when your camera was failing is because I myself experienced that when they brought me when I was here too doing a tour. So he just like I've never ever seen this happen with my camera. And I said, and that is why I asked you how well you know.
Right. Yeah,
so
that's cool.
Yeah. So that was like one of the coolest stories that I had.
That's really cool.
My cell phone battery got completely depleted when I was in the haunted house. When I got pushed down on the stairs, I had my phone with me, and I had like a full battery, and my phone just died.
Probably from draining it all to push you or something, I'm assuming.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
What advice would you give to indie filmmakers?
I would give the advice that I think a lot of people like to give, which is to really be determined to do the thing that you like. Don't let anybody or anything stop you from going out and making your project. There's so many ways to create now, and it's gotten easier and easier to film things and to do your own sort of project. My advice would be just to stay determined, stay focused. Don't compromise on the things that you believe in, no matter what kind of advice you get. I mean, at the end of the day, I think it's important to learn lessons yourself. So if somebody tells you something and you don't agree with it, it's one thing to go, okay, hey, they warned me to not do this or that because it's going to ruin whatever, right? But it's another thing if they're telling you, hey, you got to change this idea, nobody's going to like this idea or that idea, and you really feel strongly about what you have put together to make this project, like stay determined and do it. And if it turns out that it doesn't work and they were right, at least you learned that like you learned it for yourself in the way that you learned why it doesn't work. You learned how to do it better in the future. And filmmaking is a constant, like filmmakers are constantly evolving and learning and growing from their projects. And it's important to actually there really is no failing in this industry because I mean obviously that's not 100% true, but what I mean by that is just because a project doesn't turn out the way you wanted it to, just because it doesn't become successful in the way that you might have wanted to, or maybe make its money back. Every experience that you have in filmmaking, and especially if you've dedicated yourself to the process, is valuable, and it's a learning experience and something for you to grow on. And nobody's movie is ever going to be perfect. Nobody's movie is ever going to be exactly the way they want it to be. And the important thing is like getting out there and doing it, and not letting people stand in your way or stop you or discourage you, or it doesn't have to be, you don't have to wait for a certain budget or it's great if you can raise it. It's great if you can get it, but there are enough people who are passionate out there who want to make content as well, who have equipment, who, and everything you do as you get out there and do it, you're learning and you're growing and you're meeting new people and you're working with other guys who might lead to another job or another situation. So I would just say, just don't let anybody stop you from or discourage you from actually finish your project, finish it. Even if you've made it and it's nothing like you wanted it to be, and it's not see it through. Don't give up on it. Don't, because I know a lot of projects that people have just started it and they get halfway through it and they ran out of funding, or they didn't do whatever. Then make a trailer out of it, or make or change it, or make it work. There's nothing should stop you from completing your project and working it through, and it will always be a valuable experience, no matter what it is, no matter how good or bad it is. It's always a valuable experience. If you are dedicated to the process and you really want to be a filmmaker and you really want to do this with your career and your life, you have to keep creating. You have to keep making your work. it would be like an artist, like a painter saying, oh, well, I'll start painting as soon as I have, the right kind of canvas and the right kind of paints. Otherwise, I'm just going to sit here. I'm going to call myself a painter, but I don't really have any. I'm not really painting anything yet, but I will be painting as soon as I get money to paint. But you just do it. You just have to be creative. You have to do it. If you have to make your movie on an iPhone, if you have to make your movie on a, on a Canon side, whatever. Like, there's plenty of ways to make your film that and your content that's at the very least is going to it may not be exactly what you envisioned for the project, but it's going to teach you as a filmmaker, so that the next project, so you'll start to go, okay, the next time I write something, I'm not going to put in a scene that's going to that's going to be this hard for me to actually accomplish, or I'll start to write around the things that I know that I can, the locations that I can use, or the people that I know, or the equipment I have access to. But you'll learn from all these experiences. So I think it's important to do and keep doing and not get discouraged, no matter, because it's always tough. Like, filmmaking is tough. It's always going to be tough. It's always hard to finish. And the thing about any kind of art is that it always has to suck before it can get good. And that's the place where people get really discouraged, and a lot of times they abandon their work. Because it's like, if you're sculpting something and you have this vision of this beautiful sculpture, but as you're making it, it looks like slabs of clay, and it's ugly, and it just doesn't look like, it's going to take a while before it looks great and before it looks right. But and it's hard for artists, because you see the finished product in your head of what you want it to be and how good it can be, but in front of you, you have all this, you just have the slabs of clay that are just not looking right yet, and it's just so important to keep chipping away and get it there, and again, to learn from the things that didn't turn out right the first time you did it. Constantly create is just what I would say, and learn from it, because there's just there's nothing there's no better film school than the experience of being on set and working and learning from other people and meeting people and creating and just keeping, like, there's no reason you can't do it. You don't need a 35 millimeter camera, and you don't need a giant editing bay. This stuff can get done in very small, on very small scales, and still be very valuable experiences for you. And a lot of times these things can turn out to be, they do go places. There are a lot of projects that get made for nothing, and they go places because it all comes from the passion and the hard work that goes into it. So I would just say, don't let anything stop you.
Awesome. I completely agree with everything you just said. And I think what you were trying to say at one point too is learning from your mistakes is also a really good way to learn how to create better too. Besides, and like you were saying earlier, learning your mistakes, you're gonna know what works, what doesn't work. And there was one more thing you mentioned, but now I'm drawing a blank right now. But I think you pretty much covered it. And like I told, like what we told, like we told when we were guest co-host on another podcast, we said, kind of, even though we're not filmmakers, but in this case it works too. But we said something along the lines of create something that you love, treat it like it's a baby, help let it grow. And if anybody tried to get in your way and tell you otherwise, tell them there's the door, and just do it yourself.
Exactly, that's exactly right. And the great thing is, like, as you do it, you start to find the collaborators and people that you want to work with, and that will help you and that will work with you, and that you can, start to create with, and I just think that stuff's so important. And exactly like you said, learning from your mistakes is so much better than being told not to do something and then not knowing why that doesn't work, or not, like, so I'm told, hey, don't shoot that scene because it's too complicated, and I go, okay, but I don't know why that's too complicated. You just told me not to do it, and so now I'm not going to do it, and I haven't learned anything from this process. But if I actually go out and try it, I go, oh, okay, so now I see what's complicated about it. This is hard, but now I know better. If I want to do something, if I want to accomplish something like this, then I can start to figure out, okay, I do this a little differently, if I tweak this, if I do that different, if I don't make this so whatever, then I can create the kind of scene I wanted to create and not make it too complicated for me to, whatever it is, like whatever the situation is. You learn, you grow, you understand. You also learn how to recognize, as you grow in your professional career, like when you start to see the red flags easier. But I already know why this scene is going to be difficult and what I need to do to fix it, or how to make it better, or how to not fall into any traps, because I've learned this when I was doing this, on my own. So, I think today, in some ways, it's like, but the other thing I would say is definitely don't try to do everything by yourself. It is important to learn how to collaborate with people. I think one of the difficult things that some young filmmakers fall into is that they end up being the person who's they're the cinematographer, the writer, the director, the lighting guy, sometimes they're even the actor, like whatever. They're doing so many things on there that they don't learn how to communicate their ideas and communicate their thoughts. And as you start to get into the space of working on bigger projects when you can't do all those things by yourself, it's really important to know how to, if you don't know how to talk to people and tell them what you want to do and tell them what you're trying to accomplish and creatively work alongside of other people, that can be a big challenge as you grow into bigger projects, because it is really important to be able to tell people, to communicate what it is you're trying to accomplish and communicate with the people that you're working with. And that's just one of the bigger things. It's challenging for sure. And sometimes sometimes it's intimidating and scary to try to work with other people. And sometimes it's way easier to just do it yourself than to tell somebody what you want them to do. And I would say that's all good and well and important to get where you need to go with things. But you really do, if you want to work on bigger sets, if you want to work on sets where you have a crew, and the biggest thing will be, it doesn't have to be, you don't have to talk to everybody on the set, you don't have to know everybody, and you end up having your department heads and communicating to the team of people that you want to communicate. But it's just important to learn how to communicate with your director of photography, with your actors, with your whatever. Like, you have to be able to talk these things out, so that so I would just say that even though it sometimes can be scary and sometimes can be just much easier to do everything by yourself, and I would say it's really, really good learning experience to force yourself to work with other people. And it might be bad experiences. That's going to happen on bigger sets too. That's not a reason not to do it, though. It keep doing it until you learn from that as well. It's such a big part of the process in filmmaking is the collaboration with the people that you're working with. And I would just encourage younger filmmakers who maybe don't have as big of a crew, or just have so much of the vision in their head that they just want to shoot it themselves. They just want to do everything themselves. And that's great. I mean, it's great to develop that muscle of the vision that you're creating, but you also have to develop the muscle of communicating to the people at some point. And so I would encourage, making sure that that you are doing that, because I think a lot of film school people end up or not just necessarily film school, or just independent young filmmakers end up, it's easier to just do these stuff. Like, I know exactly what I want it to look like. I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to shoot it. I'm going to put the lights exactly where I want them to be. I'm going to put the camera where I want it to be. I know exactly what I want. And it's easier than telling somebody and talking to people about this. And also, I don't like to talk to people because they make me uncomfortable. Whatever it is, there's just, that's okay. It's okay to feel that way. It's okay to not like talking to people, but you have to learn you're going to have to learn how to do it some more if you really want to be in the filmmaking industry and really want to work with crews and people. And it, again, it can be scary at first. I definitely found myself intimidated when I was younger on bigger film crews, because I felt intimidated. Even though I'd accomplished a lot of things in my smaller independent life and won a lot of awards and done some really cool work, I hadn't like done it with teams as big as I was suddenly working with. And I suddenly had to like, I was just afraid to talk to some of these guys. I'd be afraid that they were going to look down at me, or, you know, some of these guys have done a lot of work together. They'd seen a lot of different, you know, and I just didn't want to like look like I didn't know what I was talking about, or I didn't want to say the wrong thing that was going to end up hurting the film, rather than like, you know, like I don't want to miscommunicate my ideas and have them, you know, create something that wasn't exactly what I wanted it to be. And then suddenly, you know, they spent money building a set and it doesn't look like what I wanted it to look like. So it's scary for sure, as you start to get, you know, on those bigger stages, which is just why I'd say one of the things that a lot of younger filmmakers don't spend a lot of time doing is learning how to communicate. And I think it's just a big part of the process that will help them as they grow. It'll help them actually like do better work that is closer to what they envision, because as soon as you know how to communicate the ideas that you want to the teams that you're working with, stuff is going to be a lot closer to your vision than, you know, sometimes you end up having to just like, you'll like the film might look decent or okay or not bad, but it may not look exactly what you want to look like because you tried to explain it to somebody, but they didn't quite get it. So that's a big part of the process too. Like anybody who's seen, I think it's the third season of, what was that show called? Oh, Project Greenlight. And I think it's all on YouTube. You can watch it. But you'll see the filmmaker there was somebody who, like, I actually know I know and have worked with the DP who's in that season. And, you know, he would tell me, like, this guy was a really creative guy, but he was really had such a hard time communicating to people because he was so nervous about it and so insecure and uncomfortable because he'd always just done everything himself. He just filmed everything himself. He was creative, and he was like funny and smart. But like when you watch him and you hear him talking, and like he's very mousy and doesn't like follow through with his sentences and doesn't exactly know how to, like, you know, because he was the actor, the cinematographer, the director, the editor, the writer of all his like little projects that were really creative and interesting. But as soon as he started getting on a big set, he had a really hard time communicating, had a hard time like telling everybody on the set what he wanted. And it caused a lot of friction and a lot of issues. And so he would, you know, and again, this is like, I heard firsthand experience about it, but I went and watched the whole season and I was like, wow, it's like, I get it. I get why it's hard for him, because I know what he's feeling. I know what he's experiencing, but that's why I would just say that I would encourage young filmmakers to really learn communication and at least practice it as much as they can, and collaborating with other people. So yeah, that's it. That's one of those things you don't hear as often, is just like learning how to collaborate, because as you start to do more and more work, it's such a part of the process.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think somebody else mentioned communication too when they were asked the same question when we were doing like a round table thing or something. And they brought up communication. They also brought up to buy the wardrobe rather than like get rid of it like a couple weeks after you film it, and then you have to go and reshoot it again, because otherwise you gotta take a picture and try to find, or take a still with that same clothes, and then you just gotta try to find it again. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a couple other things that he said that I think worked as well, but it's always good to get somebody else's opinion, I think, of what
for sure
learned or whatever. But yeah, definitely communication. You don't hear that much.
Yeah, because, you know, it really is the kind of thing that, like, you know, it's expensive to hire a crew. It's hard to find people who are going to work and do stuff, and, you know, and so it becomes very, you know, when people get a hold of a camera and they want to film something, do something, you know, it's like it becomes easier for them to just like that guy Gareth Edwards, who was just making this, you know, that movie Monsters, and just ran around shooting everything himself and doing all the VFX and all that stuff himself. But yeah, I've heard from a lot of directors and filmmakers who get their first big break and have such a hard time once they're finally on a bigger crew and set, actually knowing how to communicate to the people in the different departments and speaking to them. And honestly, like, one of the things that I would say to anybody is, like, as scary as it might feel, it's good to go out, and I think people respect it as well when you don't try to act like you know everything. Don't try to act like you're, like respect the fact that certain people have experience, and let them know that, like, you don't have to have an answer for every question that you're asked on a set. It's good to try to figure it out. It's good, but and sometimes it feels scary to a filmmaker to not know an answer. Like, they don't want to be asked a question because they don't want the crew member to think they don't have an answer for them, and because if they don't have the answer, then they think that they look stupid or they look like they don't know what they're doing, and that's just not. You don't have to have an answer to everything. You don't have and it's okay to just be very honest. Like, oh, you know what? I actually hadn't thought about that. That's a good question. Let me think about it a little bit. I'll get back to you about it. Or, you know what? I don't really know. Why don't we, let's figure it out together, because I want to do this and I want to do that, but I'm not sure. So, there are ways around that where you don't have to be afraid to not know answers, and you don't have to be afraid to be, it's like, that's, I think, becomes a place where a lot of filmmakers are most intimidated on set, and they don't want to be, they don't want people to know that they don't know, and it turns out to be this thing where they hide from. So, I've literally seen filmmakers hide from their crew or hide from their actors or hide because they just don't want to be asked questions. They don't want people to know that they don't, and they're insecure about not knowing things. And the thing that I would say to people is, like, if that's how you feel, that's okay to feel that way, and don't be intimidated. Don't be afraid to just be open and honest and say, you're there to do that job as a director, like, regardless of whether or not you're confident in yourself yet, or you've gotten to that space feeling like you fully earned it or deserve to be there. Because there are people. Honestly, I think it's very common for people who are just starting to get ahead in the industry or to start to do bigger projects to feel that way, because you're working with people who've been doing this for a long time, and it's like you're like, oh man, I can't believe this is happening. It's just okay to you're still there for a reason. You did earn it. You did deserve to be there, and it's better to just to talk things out with people, and to possibly and to be open about what you don't know, and to be just sort of and do that than to avoid the conversations and avoid your crew and your cast. I think that's honestly a very common thing that happens on with filmmakers, and you'll hear about a lot of filmmakers who just won't talk to their cast, or filmmakers who won't talk to certain crew, and huge filmmakers. I know huge filmmakers who legitimately avoid their cast, avoid their crew, avoid big things because they just want to talk to the very few people that are in their circle, because they are really afraid of being asked things that they don't, they don't want to. They're intimidated. They're honestly intimidated. They don't want to say that, but that's how they feel. I'm not going to name names, but I know enormous filmmakers who are intimidated and just not good at having these conversations. And like I said, it's okay to be intimidated. It's okay to be uncomfortable and not be great at talking to people, but it's a good thing to start to learn how to do, and to figure out your sort of comfortable space in that world, and not let that be something that stops you. You're going to have to talk to people on these sets and figure out, and just the more you do it, and the more it becomes something that, people will get good at, because at the end of the day, you're trying to get the closest resemblance of the ideas that you want out, into the world. And if you can't talk to the people who you're working with, that's where you're going to find yourself less happy with the work that's coming out, because you've had less control over it. You've had less ability to affect it because you didn't know how to communicate what you wanted. Stuff will still happen. Things will still get done on film. A movie will get made, and it just may or may not be exactly what you're trying to do, because you weren't able to communicate what your ideas were. So yeah, that would just be the one thing I would encourage young filmmakers to learn, and not be afraid to not know.
Awesome. I support that. And once again, I'll say it one more time, is that's kind of why me and Tessa are doing this, just to help us become more social. So that way we are not just those people that just like look down at the world every time we come out of work and want nothing more and deal with nothing more with people. Instead, we're doing this so that we can not only meet people that love the horror genre as us, but to also better ourselves to be more talkative and social to people as well, I guess.
Yeah, that's awesome. You guys are doing great. I applaud you for doing that.
Well,
And
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So Alex, where can people find House of the Witch, and where can people also possibly find you or Marvista to kind of keep up to date with upcoming projects and stuff?
Yeah. Well, House of the Witch is available in any place that DVDs are sold, and I know it's on Amazon, and it should be on Sci-Fi again shortly. And I do have another project that I'm currently editing now that I just directed in Canada that we just finished up. That will also be coming out around Halloween again on Sci-Fi, so you can look out for that as well. And yeah, I don't know. It's I've got a lot of projects on the table, and I've between now and the last year, I've directed four movies, and I've got a bunch others coming up. So I just say just keep looking out. I'll obviously I'd say tune into Everything Horror, because I'll keep you guys posted for sure.
Oh, thank you so much.
No,
Absolutely.
And on that note, Alex, you're more than welcome back onto the show anytime. So if you have like a itchy project that you want to help get out there, we'll definitely help spread the word for you.
Well, thank you so much, guys. It was great talking to you and meeting you guys on the line, and definitely we'll be in touch with you guys moving forward, and appreciate everything you guys are doing. So thank you, guys.
Well, thank you so much, Alex. And for everybody listening.
Definitely a pleasure, Alex. Thank you very much for giving us the time.
Thank you.
Yeah, and for everybody else, I will put links in the description too for Marvista and Alex, and anything I can possibly get my hands on, trailers or whatever for House of the Witch, and possibly the other previous film that Alex had done. Probably will add the Dead Static YouTube link again, because lately that has been coming out of my mouth. But people need to stop. People and myself need to stop talking about paranormal, because otherwise that film always keeps getting mentioned. It's not a bad.
It's true. No, it's true. Well, I'll tell you what. I'll make it. I'll make a promise right now. I'll send you guys exclusive images of the next movie before I send anything else out, so you guys can have the first look at the next film before anybody else will. So. I'll let you know. What's that?
I said I don't know how to take that right now, because my heart just stopped after hearing that. Hang on a second. Is my heart beating right now? Do you feel a heartbeat?
Yeah, I still feel a pulse. You're not dead.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to make
good. I didn't mean to kill you, but I appreciate it. So yeah, that's great.
So everybody, thank you again, Alex. Thank you for your time. I know we had technical difficulties yesterday, and then those got figured out today, thank God. Yeah, we look forward for any future project, and we look forward to talking to you again.
All right, 1, 2, 3. Stay scary.
Scary.
Whoops, I did it too quickly.